if you're not sleeping, forget about it. Sleep touches everything. So if you want to be performing at your best, even if we're not talking athlete or military, but we're just talking about being able to think clearly, being able to make good decisions, being able to think rationally, like sleep touches everything. So whatever your peak performance, quote unquote, looks like, sleep will help you get there.
Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stephenson, the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, where we empower you to live your best audacious life ever. I'm your host, Audley Stephenson, and it's always a pleasure to be here with you, sharing insights and inspiration that can help you on your journey. I totally appreciate you spending time out of your day to be here with us. I know how busy you are, so it's muchly appreciated, and I hope you're ready to explore the incredible power of sleep and how it can transform your life. Now, just like a well-tuned engine needs the right fuel and maintenance to perform optimally, our minds and bodies require the restorative power of sleep to function at their best. Today, we're diving deep into the world of sleep hygiene, exploring the importance of establishing a consistent nighttime routine and how that really can, and how the quality of sleep can drastically impact your performance, especially from a cognitive function level and overall well-being. You know, like a garden needs the right conditions to thrive. You know, our mental health flourishes when we prioritize our sleep. You know, poor sleep can exacerbate mental health issues, while good sleep aids in emotional regulation as well as resilience. Joining us today is the remarkable Leah Kaylor. She is a sleep expert with a wealth of knowledge in the intersection of sleep, mental health, and human performance. With her extensive experience and background in psychology and her experience with the FBI, Dr. Leah is on a mission to educate individuals about the vital role sleep plays in our lives. She believes that by understanding sleep, we can make informed choices that enhance our well-being and performance. It's definitely an enlightening conversation that you dare not sleep on. So let's turn to our chat with Dr. Kaylor. Enjoy. Hey, Dr. Leah. Thank you for joining me here today on the Audacious Living Podcast. Totally appreciate you taking the time to be here. So thank you.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
No, this is great. I oftentimes talk about how exciting it is to kind of get engaged with conversations with individuals, and you know, the idea of, you know, someone listening to our talk, and I jokingly call it eavesdropping. Someone can eavesdrop on our conversation and take something away from that can make it institute in their own lives to help them get to a better place. It's a really cool process, I think, in my perspective. So, but I only could do that if you're here. So again, thank you. Appreciate you taking the time to do this. You know, here on this podcast, you know, we spend much time really encouraging individuals, again, living the best audacious life that we talk about. You know, it is an individual journey, and you know, the path that we take to get to where we need to go is very individualized. And I think, and so your background in expertise as a sleep expert, I think is really, really fascinating, because when we talk about sort of human performance and successful living, I think sleep is that underrated secret weapon, if you will, right? That most, right?
Oh, absolutely. And you know, it's funny that we're talking about this right now. I literally just got back from the Human Performance and Biosystems Summit happening in DC, and it's all about how can we, and this one was more military based, but how can we make our warfighters at their peak performance? And so I came there and I just gave my whole sleep spiel, because if you're not sleeping, forget about it. Sleep touches everything. So if you want to be performing at your best, even if we're not talking athlete or military, but we're just talking about being able to think clearly, being able to make good decisions, being able to think rationally, like sleep touches everything. So whatever your peak performance, quote unquote, looks like, sleep will help you get there.
It's and I don't think there will be very many people who will disagree with that, right? People go, yeah. Most will go, yeah. But for some reason, it's still not happening, and then I'm sure there's a variety of things or a variety of issues going on from your perspective. And I should also put out there, I mean, you're a sleep expert with the FBI. And so that I think that brings another sort of unique perspective. But maybe sort of let's actually maybe take a sort of step back and sort of talk about your journey into this area, and you sort of look at the intersection between human performance and sleep and sort of professionalizing that, right, and becoming an expert in that field. I wonder if you sort of talk about that journey for you and how you got there.
Yeah, absolutely. I can do that. And one thing that I'll mention is everything I'm going to say here are my own thoughts, beliefs, opinions. And this podcast is not sponsored by the FBI or endorsed by them. So just putting that out there first. But honestly, whenever it comes to sleep, I kind of stumbled into it. Like this was not something that I had planned. This was not something, honestly, I wasn't even really that great of a sleeper like if we go back in time, just to give you an example, I was a collegiate athlete and I was waking up like I'm an early bird, so I like taking the earliest morning classes that they have available, like going to the library, studying, and then I would like go take a 3-hour nap in the middle of the day, then go to gymnastics practice, which are normally like 4 hours long, go to dinner, go back to the library, and then whenever it's time to go to bed, couldn't figure out like why I wasn't sleepy. Like, do I need over the counter? Do I need like sleep aid? Like, what's going on? Like, why can't I sleep well? Well, obviously, looking back on it now, like the answer to that is very obvious as to why I wasn't sleeping well. But I think that if you don't know these types of things, there's so many things that we do to get in our own way whenever it comes to sleep and getting better sleep. But to answer your question about how I ended up where I ended up, I was finishing my last year of my PhD at the Memphis VA Medical Center. And while you're on your final year, you get to go to do lots of different rotations, work with lots of different populations. You are really just trying to get all the experiences you can and become really well rounded before they put you out into the universe and you start working under your own license. And while I was there were lots of different rotations to choose from. And essentially, what happens is we take all the interns, we take all the postdocs, we go into one room, and nobody comes out until we're all relatively happy-ish. And so I wish that I could go back in time and remember if the sleep clinic was one of the rotations that I actually wanted, or if it was just one of the ones that I was kind of compromising on so we could get the job done
Right.
and get a move on. But nonetheless, I ended up in the sleep clinic and just so incredibly grateful that I ended up there because I got a really, really good idea of how many people are struggling with sleep. And I definitely didn't know that. I didn't understand that, even though I was having my own like sleep journey a couple years ago beforehand that I just told you about. I didn't realize how much sleep touched, how many people were struggling with sleep. So when I was at the VA, I would teach sleep hygiene courses and people would be falling asleep on me all the time. Like, pretty funny, but at the same time, like I get it, you're very sleep deprived. One thing that I learned how to do that I had no idea, and I imagine a lot of your listeners don't know this either, is that I learned how to treat nightmares. And that's something that we can do, and it responds very, very well to this particular type of treatment. Another thing that I learned how to do was, well, I understood how impactful obstructive sleep apnea is, especially when it's not being treated, and then helping people get used to having like a CPAP uh, mask on over their nose and mouth, and kind of how anxiety provoking that can be for folks. So trying to help them relax whenever they're wearing the machine and get used to wearing it. So many different things that I learned there and just so incredibly grateful. And that was my final year of my PhD. And then the offer came in for me to join the FBI as a full-time psychologist. And I jumped on that. And within one of my first days, my supervisor at the time had asked me, okay, Leah, well, what's going to be your thing? And I said, well, there's still a lot of stigma around mental health. This was several years ago. And I would say still that we're getting better and better. But, then you add the layer of law enforcement on that, and then you lay another layer on top of that within the Bureau. And even though they have people like myself on board full time who are mental health professionals, I think that there's still some hesitancy to use services. So I said, okay, well, how about sleep being my thing? Like I just got off a rotation at the sleep clinic. I learned a ton, but also I think that everyone can relate to having a poor night's sleep, no matter who you are, no matter what's going on. You've got chronic pain, or you've got indigestion, or you have a dog who needs let out in the middle of the night. Everybody can relate to that. And I think that that was my foot in the door for, okay, I'm going to teach you. I'm going to show you that I'm not that scary. I think whenever I talk about being a psychologist, people are afraid that I'm going to analyze them or write a dissertation on them. No, No, I've already written one. I don't want to do that again. So I think that that was my foot in the door to then see if people wanted to work with me for other mental health symptoms and conditions and things like that. Because my other specialty is trauma, and so that's kind of exactly what happened. And I lo and behold, I've definitely made a name for myself within the bureau as far as sleep and all the various different things that come along with sleep. So I probably do a a lecture to our folks at least once a month, if not more than that, because there's just such a need and such a hunger for sleep. And I would say that whenever it comes along with that, as far as like the human performance aspect is,
Mhm.
sleep touches everything. Like
Yeah.
try and change my mind, try and tell me that sleep doesn't touch everything. And so I think that depending upon who you are and what your job looks like or what it is that you want to improve, sleep can do that for you. And I think that that's just something that's becoming very trendy right now is we are finally realizing, I should say, waking up to how much sleep can do for us.
Yeah, I would agree with you. It touches lots and lots and lots, and the recognition of that. I think it's starting to. I think
Yeah.
awareness is starting to raise a bit, and maybe you would better know what than I would. But I do feel that if there's more conscious attention paid to sleeping. It's funny, conscious about sleeping. I guess is really what we're talking about here. More conscious about sleeping. There certainly could help. But there's barriers and blockages, right? And oftentimes, again, and it's different for everyone, right? Everyone's got their own
Right.
reasons. But the pathway, and I'm glad you sort of touched on the connection to mental health because there is a strong connection between sleep and
Oh,
mental health.
yes.
And in some instances, if you're not getting that sleep and that rest, it could exasperate your mental health condition even more if you're struggling. I wonder if you sort of talk about that connection, why there's the linkages, how strong they are.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And again, I think that people need to like wake up to how much sleep touches. And so whenever it comes to sleep and mental health, like let's take a step back and think about what are the various different things that are happening while we're sleeping. Because I think one misconception that a lot of people have is whenever you go to turn off the light switch to turn off your lights to go to bed, I think that a lot of people also have this idea of you're turning off the light switch for your brain, turning off the light switch for your body, and that like you're kind of dormant, you're not doing anything. And that really couldn't be further from the truth. Your brain and your body are so incredibly active at night, like, and they're very productive, probably more productive than some people are in a normal day. So whenever it comes along with that, if we're speaking specifically about mental health, one of the things that we cycle throughout the night is REM sleep. And I think a lot of people have heard about REM, but don't actually know what happens. And so REM is called, well, REM stands for, I should say, rapid eye movement sleep. And basically, how we know that someone is in REM is that their eyelids are closed and their eyes are darting back and forth. And that's how we know that someone's in REM sleep. And like I mentioned, we cycle through various different stages of sleep throughout the night. But our biggest chunk of REM happens kind of right before our alarm clock goes off in the morning. And with REM, it's very, very important because what's happening is I like to kind of call it like an emotional detox. Like there's so much that our senses take in all day long. So our eyes, our ears, touch, like all of our various different senses, they're taking in so much information. And with that, we don't need to be hanging on to all of that. And we certainly don't need to be storing all of that. So the brain is busy at night sifting through all of these pieces of information to determine, okay, what's important for storing into memory, what's important for putting into working memory, what's important to just trash, and this is something that we don't need at all. So it's sifting through all of that information, but it's also trying to make sense too. So think about, all of the existing knowledge that we already have. Okay, so if we're sifting through this information, say for example, like you're listening to this podcast and you're learning something new about sleep. Okay, well, you already kind of have an existing framework about what sleep is and maybe a
Mhm.
little bit about why we sleep. So tonight, when you're in REM, your brain is going to take the information that it thinks is valuable and it's going to integrate it with the neural networks that are already existing for sleep so it
Mhm.
can place it in there and it can kind of integrate with the knowledge that you already have. So that's another important thing. So it's very important for memory, it's very important for learning and memory consolidation, but a big piece of it is just making sense of our experiences and understanding. So whenever something has happened to us that's emotional, that's painful, that's
Mhm.
upsetting, our brain needs to go through REM sleep in order to make sense of that, to process it, to make sure that like kind of like to say like taking the sting out of something.
Okay.
And that is really what's happening during REM is that when we don't have the opportunity to do that, then that's where we end up with these painful memories that we're just having a very hard time processing. And again, it's I'm so grateful that my two specialties are trauma and sleep because whenever it comes to mental health, just like what you alluded to earlier is if you're not sleeping well, then your mental health is not going to be doing so hot. If your mental health isn't doing so hot, chances are you're probably having a hard time falling asleep and staying asleep. So it's just this very vicious circle. So I think that it's important that if people who are listening are having a hard time with mental health and with sleep, that there are things that you can do in the daytime and in the nighttime too to try and
Okay.
hit it from both ends and improve. But that's really what is happening is we're just going through all the information from all day long. We're integrating it into our existing neural networks, and we're just trying to detox and get rid of things that we don't need, and also just trying to take the emotional sting out of events and things that have happened to us and put it in its memory filing cabinet where it belongs, if you will.
Hmm. I think it's fascinating when you talk about all the things that happen when we're sleeping and how much we
Yeah.
aren't aware. Could you touch on some of those things? And then I want to go back to the things that we can do in the daytime to help ourselves. But I'd love to hear about some of the things that are happening. I think it's important people understand. And again, I don't think anyone's going to debate with you that sleep's not important, but I think this sort of reinforces that.
Yeah. So, we talked about what was happening in REM. So let's
Hmm.
talk about. So we have light sleep, deep sleep, and REM sleep, and we're cycling. So, if we're talking a normal, average, healthy sleeper, that person is their sleep cycles are going to be between like 50 to 90-ish minutes, and if you allow yourself to sleep as long as you should, which for an average adult should be anywhere from like 7 to 9 hours per night, you're going to go through that sleep cycle about five-ish times. Again, we're just talking generalities for the average healthy sleeper. And with these stages, different things are happening. So we talked a fair amount about REM just now and kind of this emotional detox that's happening and learning and memory. And one thing I'll say too is that the stages are unique, but they also overlap in the various different things that they do. So let's talk more specifically about REM because when I think about REM, I really think about physical restoration. And
Okay.
when you're talking about peak performance, specifically about like physical performance, or, again, in my world, it's first responders, it's military, if we're talking about, or, athletes too, anyone who wants physical peak performance, deep sleep is really where it's at. So when we're in deep sleep, what's happening is that this is the opportunity for our body to get into a state of very profound rest. So our blood pressure should be dropping, our heart rate should be dropping, our rate of respiration should be dropping, our muscles should be relaxing. Like this is a state where we need to get into relaxation. And when that happens, it's really, really important for our body as a whole. So one of the coolest things that I learned when I was in the sleep clinic was, and this might sound kind of silly and like very basic, but all of your organs should get an opportunity to have a rest break. And that's what's happening at night. And if you don't give yourself the opportunity to sleep as long as you need to, or if it's very fragmented, if it's very surface level, those organs aren't getting the opportunity to rest. This is very important because whether you believe it or not, like all day long, we're asking our bodies to do lots of different things, to work very hard, and there's going to be micro wear and tear and damage that happens. And so when we are in deep sleep, this is a period of restoration, of healing at the cellular level, all the way up. And so if, again, we're not giving ourselves the opportunity to get into these deep stages of sleep, well, that's a problem because it's like, well, sorry, body, sorry, muscles, sorry, organs.
Right.
You're just going to have to wait until tomorrow. And that isn't necessarily guaranteed. Maybe you'll get it, maybe you won't. Whenever we also think about energy too, like one of the things that I like to say is that I imagine that a lot of people here listening probably put their phone on charge whenever they sleep so that the next morning when they wake up, they know that they're going to have 100% battery and it's going to last as long as it will last.
Right.
That's the same thing that I like to think about whenever I'm getting into bed is that like I'm kind of getting on my charger and that if I give myself what it is that I need, I'll end up with 100% battery tomorrow and I'll be able to again perform at my peak performance. So I think that it's really important also too, whenever we're talking about the the brain and the body and the various different things that are happening. One thing that's really important is, and I think in this day and age, in this culture that we live in, there's so much hustle, there's so much go, there's so much pressure
Right.
to get as much done as you possibly can. And when we are giving ourselves the opportunity to sleep and the opportunity to rest, that
Mhm.
when our heart rate goes down and our blood pressure goes down, we are giving our cardiovascular system a rest, which is so important given the amount of
Mhm.
people who have cardiovascular issues or maybe have a genetic predisposition to cardiovascular disease. So when we're doing that, we're giving our body the opportunity to rest and to relax and to kind of be this protective mechanism. Because again, if we're not doing that, well, then we're causing damage and we could potentially be, setting ourselves up for various different conditions and issues. So let me stop there and just see if you have any questions because we talked about a lot of different things that are
Yeah, no,
happening
no,
at
no.
night. So,
I was gonna say, as you were talking, the piece that
yeah.
really jumped out at me when you talk about the power of rest, right?
Yeah,
I'm gonna use the word transformative because I think it's that impactful.
totally.
I don't know. Are there sort of, I was gonna say, there's sort of science-backed facts that support why rest is so important that people may not be aware of, or things are out there?
I, I would say that this is probably my most like hard-hitting fact that I love telling people
Okay.
whenever I do live presentations. So I'll lay it out. So again, I think that this is just so, so, so cool. So again, when we are in this very deep state of rest and the brain and the body are doing its own thing, and again, we're only just like scratching the surface of what's happening, but I would say actually this is probably the coolest thing that happens. So your brain shrinks up and cerebral spinal fluid comes up from the spinal cord and it comes and gives your brain kind of like a little car wash. And
Hmm.
what's happening is that there's misfolded proteins and gunk and junk and all kinds of things that are kind of building up in the brain, and that needs to be cleared away. So you can kind of think about it as like this trash crew that comes in and picks up the garbage and gets rid of it as waste. So that's really important. But I like to use the analogy of, everybody probably lives somewhere where you put your trash outside and, a waste management group comes and picks it up. And so everyone can relate to that.
Yes.
But what would happen if you put your trash out and they didn't come? Well, you're going to continue to keep making trash and it's got to go somewhere. So maybe you put even more out on your curb. And after a while, it's just going to start to stack up. It's going to stink. Maybe you're going to get some rodents. Like you're going to have some issues. This is a problem. And that's the same thing that's happening in our brain, especially if we're not allowing ourselves to rest and get into those deep restorative stages of sleep. We are just allowing this to build up. And here's the kicker that really gets everybody's attention is when we allow these misfolded proteins
Hmm.
and microscopic junk to build up, that's often associated with, and I'm not saying causes, I'm saying associated with neurodegenerative diseases like dementia, like Alzheimer's, because this waste needs to be cleared away. And if we're not giving our brain and body the opportunity to do that and it builds up, that's a problem. And
Right.
I say associated, not caused, because we know that whenever it comes to neurodegeneration, there's lots of other factors like your lifestyle, your diet, genetic predisposition, things like that. But if you are, if you want to take good care of your body and your brain and keep it for as long as you can and functioning well, sleep's the answer.
Interesting. That is a powerful answer. One I've not heard before, or familiar with this. That's interesting that our brain needs our brain. We know, the various systems need that time to rest, but
Yes,
to hear what's actually happening is really, really important. Then when you're able to identify the potential linkages sort of in the long term, I think that's also important just to sort of be mindful of. Uh, um,
absolutely.
again, sleep is different for everyone. People will say, the number of hours that people sleep for, I think, is also sort of an interesting conversation. I know I think you said optimum is 7 to 9 hours. I think you just said a moment ago.
So for adults, and we're talking ages like 18 to like mid 60s,
Hmm.
the what is recommended is between 7 to 9 hours. And again, I think that this fact here is something that really surprises people is that the American Academy of Sleep Medicine says that less than 7 hours is considered sleep deprivation. And I think that, that would blow most people away is that, oh, 7 hours? Well, that feels like a luxury. Like I'm not even at 7 hours and you're telling me that I'm sleep deprived.
Right.
So I think that yeah, it's pretty incredible. But yes, there will be individual differences in how rested people feel, but that is what the science tells us.
Got you. Okay. You mentioned earlier there's things that we could do during the night and day to help with our sleep. I'd love to hear some of the things that maybe you can share with our listeners.
There's so many things that we can do, and it, I mean the possibilities are endless. And I feel like again, I think it's so important to say this is you don't know what you don't know. Like no one really taught us like how to sleep. And maybe we have some things that we're doing that we think are very useful, and maybe there are things that we're doing and we don't realize that they're getting in our own way. So I would say um first and foremost, like what I want to talk about is kind of us getting in our own way first and how we
Okay.
can kind of fix that.
Hmm.
So, if you're a normal, average, healthy sleeper and you're cycling through the various different stages of sleep, you should be entering deep sleep as your head hits the pillow and as you're laying down for bed. So that's where the biggest chunk of deep sleep is happening. And then whenever we get closer and closer to the time when our alarm is going to go off, that's when we have the biggest chunk of REM sleep. And like I said, we cycle through. So, but I just want to emphasize that you get the biggest chunk of deep when you're falling asleep and the biggest chunk of REM when you are waking up.
Hmm.
Now, again, in this society that we live in, there's such pressure to do more with less, get more done in fewer hours, like just hustle and push and achieve as much as you possibly can. And with that, there ends up being a pressure. And I know I'm guilty of this. I say this all the time, as I wish I had more hours in the day. And I imagine that a lot of people listening to this also feel that way and also say that same statement. And so, I like to tell people that they're magicians, that you figure out a way to make more hours in the day. And the way that we often do that is by cutting sleep, and whether that's cutting it on the back end or the front end. And when we do that, and now that we've talked about the stages of sleep, we're really doing ourselves a disservice, right?
Right.
So if you decide, and whether it's for something that I need to get this project done, or this deadline is happening and this needs to get finished, or if it's just I feel like I need more me time, like that was such a great episode and that cliffhanger really got me, I need to see what happens. No matter what it is, I think that everyone can relate to having not enough hours in the day. So if you decide, all right, well, I'm going to stay up 1 hour later and I'm going to finish this project, or I'm going to stay up for one more episode, well, just know that when you make that choice, and I think that that's what's really important, is educating people and
Hmm.
then having them decide with this information, what kind of choice are you going to make? Because still, ultimately, it is your choice. But
Yes.
now that you have the information, what will you do with it? And so, with deep sleep and all the things that come with that, like giving your body this very deep rest, your energy reserves are building back up. We didn't even talk about immune system. We didn't talk about growth hormone. Like, there's lots of different things that are happening during deep that we haven't touched. But nonetheless, I think that everyone got that deep is very important. So if you decide, oh, well, I'm just going to stay up an hour later, well, you're like cutting out a huge chunk of deep sleep and all the benefits you could possibly getting from that. Similarly, whenever we decide, oh, it's fine. I know that I need to get that done. I'm feeling pretty tired, but I'll just wake up an hour earlier tomorrow and finish that, or answer all those emails, or do whatever it is that I need to do. Well, that's where we're getting into our biggest chunk of REM sleep. And again, we talked about REM is so important for learning, for memory consolidation, for emotion regulation. And so we have this great way of making more hours in the day, but it comes at a cost.
Right.
This
Yes.
this magic trick of creating more hours in the day comes with a great cost. And I think that it's just so important that people understand that. And I think that that's one of the best pieces of information that I can give folks is giving them this choice of, now that you have the information, what are you going to do with it? And are there other ways that you can make more hours in the day, or shift things around, or delegate, or are these things really truly that important and they need to be done? So just putting that out there for folks.
Got you. Well, I'm hearing loud and clear the importance of prioritizing our sleep, right? In the grand scheme of our day, right? Sleep is a thing that we do. And so if you were to,
Right.
if you sort of plan out your day and you start off with, I'm going to bed at this time, then reverse it, like, all the things that need to take place in that day. And if you know what, and if you can get it all in, then maybe you've got too much on the plate. You need to move things around. And so I think that very subconscious planning, I think, is really what you're alluding to. What I'm hearing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely think that it's about planning. And for folks who are like, well, I don't even know where to start, do something called a time audit. And this seems very basic, but it'll give you a great idea of where your time is going. And you can find sheets like this online if you kind of Google like time audit, and it will be something that you can print out or you can use on your computer. And it's like 15-minute like increments. And basically, just figuring out exactly where your time is going, and do that for a week, do that for maybe even 2 weeks, and you will have an excellent idea of where all of your time disappears to. And that will, once you're done with doing a time audit for a week or 2 weeks, however long you decide, figuring out, okay, what are these things that are absolutely vital that only I can do? What are the things that are time wasters? What are the things that like I enjoy, but maybe I could do less of? And just figuring out, and I think that this will be very illuminating for people to figure out where all their time is going, because there are definitely things that, and I would say probably social media. And I understand that for some people that may be relaxing or maybe distracting, but also we know that sometimes it's not very great for your mental health either. So I think that people can get a very good idea of where their time is going and
Mhm.
how important those tasks are, and then making an informed choice.
Gotcha. I gotta say, I'm a big fan of napping. I love naps,
Okay.
especially on the weekend, if I can just sneak in, an hour here or whatever, I think it's fantastic. What I find the challenge I find sometimes I'll nap, but I'll stay up later as a result of me getting all this rest.
Yes, you
Is
will.
yeah, and so I'm wondering, so does that mean napping isn't good? I mean, I'm not gonna hear you say naps. Yeah, gonna have a hard time hearing you say nap or getting rest isn't good, or maybe something that we should be mindful. But I guess I'm just want to talk about napping because I know I'm like, oh man, I slept today and I can't go to bed, and sometimes I'm even up later as a result, right?
Yes, exactly. What you're describing, I'm not surprised by whatsoever. So, first and foremost, let me say that if you are sleepy, and like you're doing something like behind the wheel or
Yep.
operating heavy machinery, something along those lines, take a nap. Like whenever it comes to safety purposes, like all bets are off. Like it doesn't matter, go sleep, go get a nap. So I would say first and foremost, safety comes first.
Yes.
Secondly, I think what you're describing is something that I hear often, right? Like it's not unusual. Like I was just at a conference and someone wanted to talk to me about naps when I got off the stage. And whenever it comes to naps, again, I think that it really depends. And I'm going to tell you what camp I fall into.
Okay.
And you're going to read tons of things out on the internet and just take it for what it's worth. This is my opinion. This is how I feel. So I like to give the analogy of a Thanksgiving dinner.
Okay.
I, in the United States, we celebrate Thanksgiving, and Thanksgiving is all about food, comfort food, dessert, eating as much as you possibly can. That's what it's about. And for me, I'm I don't endorse binge eating, but on one particular day when we're celebrating, I do. I want to have as much of this delicious food as I can. I may go back for seconds. I certainly want dessert. And so that's what I like to think about my Thanksgiving dinner is kind of like sleeping throughout the night and getting a really good night's rest.
Okay.
But I also think about if I was busy, like if I had lunch and then I decided to go have my Thanksgiving meal, or if I was snacking, or if I was cooking and I was just eating the whole time while I was cooking, that how hungry am I going to be for my Thanksgiving dinner? Not as hungry as I possibly could if I,
Right.
just waited and saved up and really went hard at Thanksgiving. So that's what I like to, the analogy that I like to give
Okay.
is like snacks and napping are the same, and then getting a really good night's rest and Thanksgiving meal are how I like to compare them. So whenever we talk about it like that, I think people get a better understanding of, oh, okay, like that makes more sense. Because just like what you're describing, we have this chemical called adenosine that builds up in our body. So whenever we wake up, adenosine should be relatively low. Adenosine you can also think about as sleep pressure. So when you wake up, it should be very low.
Mhm.
And then throughout the day, it should build and build and build and build and build and get as high as possible before we fall asleep. And so that chemical building up in the body is what makes us feel sleepy at bedtime and helps us fall asleep and stay asleep. Now, when people take naps, the adenosine is building, but then when you take that nap, you're kind of clearing out some of that adenosine. You're clearing out some of that sleep pressure. So it may feel good to nap, but that's why at night, whenever your normal bedtime rolls around, that you're not feeling as sleepy as you normally would. And that's why it takes you a while to fall asleep, or that you feel like your bedtime gets pushed later. Or a lot of times people find that their sleep quality isn't as good because of the nap. So that's what's happening, is that you're, again, getting in your own way by taking a nap because the adenosine was building up. And then by taking a nap, you kind of threw off your sleep drive, if you will. So I hope that that
Mhm.
makes sense. But that's how I feel about naps. Again, whenever it comes to safety, safety first. But that's what I would recommend. And the reason why I say all of this is because I would 100% rather see you get a full night's rest where
Right.
you're getting the hours that you need, you're cycling through the stages of light, deep, REM, and getting that all those very important functions right then and there. Because if you're napping, again, sometimes people wake up, and I've had this before too. I told you my story about being a collegiate athlete and taking these really long naps in the middle of the day. Well, your brain likes to complete things. So if you start a nap, and this is
Mhm.
the same idea for snoozing, if you start a nap and you only have so much time,
Yeah.
and you don't get to cycle through the whole thing because your brain wants to complete a cycle, well, then sometimes we wake up and we wonder, like, where am I? Like, what year is it? I feel so confused. Like,
Right.
that sleep inertia is also kind of getting in your own way too. And so if all you wanted to do was take like a nice nap and then you end up waking up and having sleep inertia, then that kind of throws off a lot of your day too. And that can be kind of like hard to shake. And again, depending upon what else you've got on the agenda for that day, like that can really throw you off. So I think it's important that I also explain why I feel this way, because there will be tons of people out
Right.
there who love naps and encourage naps, and this is why I feel the way that I feel.
No, and again, I just even just look at. I think the analogy is great. With Thanksgiving, in terms of your body can only do so much, and then you're stuffed, right? And so,
Yeah.
so that totally makes sense. Um, uh, it's going to be a tough one for people. Like people, I can see where individuals will be on different sides of the ledger, if you will, in terms of, well, here's where it works and here's why it doesn't. I kind of, what I'm hearing is that really it's a personal decision, really, which I think most of what we're talking about is very much personal in terms of what works for you as an individual, and go with that. As long as you're understanding what's happening to you, I think that's the key in all this.
Right. It's all going to be a choice. And again, as a psychologist, this is something that I know very well, is that like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make a drink. And so like meeting people where they are and just putting the information out there, and then they can do with it what they want. Um, so yeah, I think that that's really what it's all about. But I think one thing that has become very clear to me is there's very much a difference, and I don't think people realize it, between getting a really good night's rest and this consistent decent sleep that people are typically getting. And I think that if we do just make these small changes, if we become more aware about our schedule and our choices and the things that we are doing to kind of get in our own way, we can get to a place where we're sleeping better. And that feels very good and it feels very different.
Mhm. I know we
Yeah.
talked about some things that we can do for to optimize our sleep. How are some don'ts, things that people should be mindful or try to stay away from if they can?
Okay. This one, like, my book's coming out and the chapter is called, like, there's a difference between sleeping and passing out.
Okay.
Alcohol. There's so many people out there who like a nightcap or want to wind down with alcohol. I get it. I understand that. And alcohol, people say alcohol makes you sleepy. Yes, it does. It's a depressant. It will help make you feel sleepy. However, that sleep that you're getting is going to be very fragmented. It's going to be very surface level. It's not going to be very high quality, because what's happening is when you drink alcohol, especially as we're getting close to bed, it's going to be a depressant, so it's going to make you feel sleepy. But whenever it gets down into the stomach, then it switches gears, and the stomach is busy digesting, which is something that we don't necessarily want, because we want the stomach and all of our organs associated with
Right.
rest to be, excuse me, with digestion to be resting and repairing. So that's getting in our own way. But the alcohol then turns into a stimulant because we're breaking down all these sugars. That's a lot of what alcohol is. And then it is just making our sleep fragmented. It's not going to be as deep and restorative as it possibly can be. We are going to be more sensitive to sounds and things in our environment, which means that we're more likely to wake up or even have what we call micro awakenings, which are exactly what they sound like, small, tiny awakenings that maybe we remember, maybe we don't. And and then also dehydration, but then also alcohol can act as a diuretic too sometimes. So that means we're getting up more often to use the bathroom. So there's lots of different ways that alcohol is messing with our sleep. And so I would say if alcohol, everything in moderation, right? But if you choose to drink alcohol, maybe have it earlier in the day. And I would
Yeah.
say like 2 to 3 hours before bed. So maybe, have it at that picnic while you're out and about rather than a nightcap. So something like that. I mean, going hand in hand with that is caffeine. I would say, like, again, in our culture right now, it is all things coffee and espresso and energy. And as I'm writing the book, I'm putting together lots of different things that, you know, I, I am not a caffeine lover. I don't drink caffeine, but that's just because of how my body metabolizes it. And I don't really like that feeling. But I realize that there are so many people out there who can't function without it. And so as I'm doing my research, there's like caffeine gum and there's water with caffeine in it. I'm like, oh my gosh, can we please just leave water alone? Like, but pre-workout, like there's so many
Right.
different things that have insane amounts of caffeine. And I think that we keep pushing the limits too of caffeine and what's in it. And especially when we're getting into like energy drinks and things like
Mhm.
that, there's so much. And so people often don't understand what half-life is and what that means. And so just to kind of give an example, whenever it comes to half-life, and I'm gonna try and show our audience something. Okay, so
Okay.
this I have like a mug here.
Okay.
And with this, we'll just say that this is, and I'm sure that people are drinking way more than just this in a day, but we're just going to use this as an example. So I've got a
Mhm.
mug here, and we're just going to say that this is full of coffee.
Okay.
And half-life means that after a certain amount of time, half of that substance is gone. So for caffeine, we're going to say like 6-ish hours. Again, everybody's physiology is different,
Yes.
and there will be some people who are poor metabolizers that it takes much longer. There are going to be people who are ultra rapid metabolizers and it just gets through the system real quick. But let's just, we're going to take the average person and we're going to say like 6-ish hours is the half-life for caffeine. So say that we drink this whole coffee at 6 a.m.
Hmm.
Well, 6 hours later, at noon, we still have this much caffeine
Right.
rocking and rolling in the body.
Yeah.
Well, 6 hours later, at 6 p.m., we still have this much caffeine rocking and rolling in the body.
Yes.
And that's how half-life works, is it keeps halving the amount.
Hmm.
Well, remember that people love their caffeine, and they're probably
Right.
not just having one cup of coffee a day.
Right. Right.
There's probably other ways that they're getting caffeine. And remember, there's sodas. There's so many different things
Yes.
that have caffeine in it. And so if we keep adding and adding and adding, well, caffeine's job is to keep you awake and to keep you alert. And earlier we had talked about adenosine. Caffeine and adenosine are a very similar shape. So what happens is that caffeine comes in and kicks adenosine out of the way and makes you feel alert and awake. Not that caffeine, or excuse me, not that adenosine isn't there anymore or disappears. It's still there, but it's behind the scenes and you don't feel it as much. And so that's when our caffeine starts to wear off, that we feel even more tired because that adenosine is coming back with a vengeance. So I would say for folks getting in touch, and I think that this is normally a very eye-opening exercise, is that I'll have a slide and I'll ask people to do kind of a caffeine audit too and see
Hmm.
how much caffeine you're having throughout the day. Is this something that you actually need, or is it because this is socially what's acceptable and what's
Right.
happening, and
Right.
this is just a
Right.
routine for you? What is happening, and then trying our best to cut it off in the early afternoon because thinking about half-life, but also just getting in touch with, is this something that I have to have? Is this
Hmm.
important for me? How would I feel differently if I made some changes? And again, it's going to come down to, do you want to sleep better? Do you want to make some changes, or do you want to keep going at the pace that you're going?
Got you. Got you. And it's interesting because when you think about insomnia, for an example, right?
Oh yeah.
And which is something that a lot of people struggle with, is these little changes that you've described. For example, reducing your caffeine intake are some of the things that can be done. So it's not as if insomnia is and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not like it's an illness where you got it and you're sick and you take a medicine that goes away. There's contributing factors to it. Isn't that?
Yes. You're exactly right. There's so many different factors that come into play whenever it comes to insomnia and having a hard time falling asleep, having a hard time staying asleep. And it really is just these tiny little building blocks and becoming more aware. And like I said, no one ever taught us how to sleep.
Right.
So, whenever some of it may be eye-opening for folks, and some of
Hmm.
it may be things that they're like, oh, yeah, like, that makes sense. Like, if I keep slamming Starbucks, that, I'm not going to be able to fall asleep at night. So it's really just putting the pieces of the puzzle together and making informed, educated choices about how you want to continue on.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Nighttime routines. I'd love to hear about some things that are good things to do before going to bed.
I would say that everyone's nighttime routine, first and foremost, you should be having a nighttime routine. And this is something that we often instill in little kids and in
Sure.
babies, but I think that as we grow older, we think, oh, well, I'm an adult, like this isn't something that I need. But remember, as a child, hopefully you had a bedtime routine and that probably looked like some type of bath time, like picking out special pajamas, picking out a book, getting tucked in, maybe a lullaby, maybe another book, all
Hmm.
kinds of things like that. And that is, not that our routine has to look that way anymore, but we do need something that's going to transition us from all the busyness and the craziness of the day to a state where we feel calm and relaxed and ready to fall asleep. And so I would say doing things that feel relaxing for you. A great thing would be a warm or hot shower. Sciency, what we're doing there is, and this feels very paradoxical, but one of the things that needs to happen for you to be able to sleep is that your internal body temperature should drop about 1 to 2 degrees Fahrenheit.
Hmm.
And by taking a hot shower and then stepping out into a cooler environment, your body and your internal body temperature actually drops. So even though it sounds counterintuitive, well, why would I go take a hot shower? That can help signal to your brain and your body, okay, it's time for rest. It's time to settle down. I would say, again, I realize that there are so many demands on our time. So maybe some things that you could do would still be things that you need to do. Maybe you're packing your lunch for the next day. Maybe you're picking out your clothes for the next day. Again, hygiene stuff.
Yep.
But maybe you could do that with the lights in your environment dim. Maybe you could listen to some soft, soothing music. Maybe you could just be really mindful about what it is that you're doing. So I'd
Hmm.
say that all of those are going to be very good ideas and already like can fit in with your routine. I would say things that we don't want to do are things that are going to be very exciting and intriguing and like want us to keep going. So earlier I had talked about, oh, one more episode. It's the same thing with social media and that it's addicting. It literally is because our brain is releasing dopamine, and dopamine is this feel good hormone that we're excited, we're interested, we want to keep
Yep.
watching. This is something exciting for the brain, and it tells the brain, like, let's keep going. Like, I like this, let's keep doing more. And so, if it's something that you're watching, like a show or a movie, and it's a cliffhanger, and you're like, oh my gosh, well, there's your hit of dopamine. Or if
Right.
you're watching TikToks, one after another, and it's exciting or it's interesting. Again, sleep has so many benefits that we've talked about here today, but sleep has a really hard time competing with dopamine because
Right.
it doesn't give you this immediate release of good, feel good hormones and chemicals. Instead, you get the benefits long term, but you don't get that immediate hit like you do with dopamine. So I would say cutting out things that are going to be very exciting or just like drawing you in. We want it to be not to say that you can't enjoy a book or, a podcast, but something that's going to be more soothing rather than activating.
Mm-hmm. And get you all worked up and get your system going. Yeah. Bring
We
yourself
don't
down.
want that. That's the
Yeah.
opposite of what we want.
Is there sort of recommended time where you should start thinking about shutting things down before sleep? Like, is an hour reasonable or more?
So, what I like to say is like 2 to 3 hours before bedtime,
Okay. Okay.
we need to be thinking about what it is that we want to have in that period of time and what it is that we want to keep out of that period of time. So we talked about caffeine, hopefully cutting that off way earlier in the afternoon, but we talked about alcohol, like I said, 2 to 3 hours before bed. I'd like to see ceasing alcohol. Same thing with food though, and a lot of people don't realize this is 2 to 3 hours before bed will give your body enough time to digest. And that's what's really important, right? Like we talked about this earlier is your all of your organs should get that opportunity to rest and to repair. And so if you decide, "Oh, I'm going to eat this meal and then I'm going to go right to sleep," well,
Right.
your body is like digestion is such an energy intensive process that it's busy digesting and breaking down the food and taking all those nutrients and putting them where they need to be. And so instead, you're not getting all the benefits of that deep restorative sleep that you possibly could be. So I think that that is going to be something important. Again, exercise. Exercise is wonderful. It's fantastic and it can help us sleep. But, and again, I put all this out there. There will be some unicorns who don't follow my sleep rules and still sleep just fine. But exercise is best done in the morning or in the early afternoon, because when we exercise, especially if it's going to be moderate to vigorous, your heart rate's going up, your blood pressure is going up, your internal body temperature is going up, adrenaline, cortisol, all kinds of good things that we want for exercise. But if you try and exercise right before bed, and I get it, everyone's schedules are very different, and maybe that's the only time that you have time to exercise, that excited level, just like what we talked about, this excitement, this activation is going to be in direct contrast to what it is that we want for that relaxation, that slowness, that calmness. So these are things that I like people to think about it as we get 2 to 3 hours before bed, picking and choosing what you're going to do in that time period. Can you start to dim the lights in your environment? Can you start to do things that are soothing or relaxing? Can you light a candle that like smells really lovely and helps to get you into a state of relaxation? So again, everybody's going to be different, but just picking and choosing what feels good for you, what feels relaxing, and what's not going to compete with sleep.
Yeah. Let's stop competing with sleep, because it's a necessary piece. And I think those are little things that are quick and easy, but I think we talked earlier about the planning, and that really, really, really is important. So if we keep that in mind, I think that can help us get us on that pathway. And again, we've said a couple times now, it's going to be different for every single one of us, because we're all unique, we're all different. So we've got to figure out what works best for us.
Absolutely.
Dr. Lee, I've really appreciated the insights today. I think you've dropped so many incredible nuggets of insight for individuals and things. And really, the hope is that people walk away, really think about what they can use and apply to themselves. For listeners that want to connect with you directly or learn more about your book, The Sleep Advantage, you said it's out soon,
dropping October 1st, 2025.
Awesome. So people want to connect with you directly or get a copy of your book. Where can we send them?
Yeah. So everywhere it's Dr. Leah Kaylor. So my website is drleahkaylor.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. Social media is slowly but surely growing. I'm trying to put all kinds of little nuggets of free sleep wisdom out there. And then, like I said, the book is going to be released on October 1st. So if you go onto my website, drleahkaylor.com, you can find an area to put your email, and that you will get notifications as it gets closer to when you can begin to purchase the book. And also, if you want to work with me one-on-one, you can find information on how to do that there.
Very, very cool. And we'll make sure that all the important contact details are in the show notes below, so individuals can access that. Again, I really want to thank you for the insight. This has been a really, really informative conversation, and I think it'll sort of awaken. I like that pun, that awaken ideas in people's own minds about how they can plan their sleep and get their sleep and the contributing factors. But I think the thing that really was important is understanding what's happening and why sleep is necessary. I think you've done a great job of articulating that. So thank you for that. And thank you for being a guest today here on the Audacious Living Podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Awesome. Thank you. Fun here. I loved it too. Thank you. Back we are here on the podcast, and much thanks and appreciation goes out to Dr. Leah Kaylor for being here. She shared invaluable insights and practical tips on how to optimize our sleep, including reducing caffeine and alcohol intake and harnessing the power of deep sleep. One of the standout points for me was her analogy comparing sleep to charging a phone. Just as we ensure our devices are fully charged for the day ahead, we must prioritize our sleep to recharge our bodies and our minds. I encourage you to connect with Dr. Leah directly through her website, which is drleahkaylor.com, where you can also find information about her upcoming book, The Sleep Advantage, and which is set to be released very, very soon. Be sure to check out the show notes for special offers and additional resources. I want to take this opportunity to thank you for tuning in to another edition of the Audacious Living Podcast. I hope you found our discussion with Dr. Leah Kaylor as enlightening as I did, because it definitely opened up my eyes, if you will, to the vast benefits of sleep sleep. Remember, just as a well-tended garden needs the time and the care to flourish, so do we need to nurture our sleep to thrive in our daily lives. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to like, follow, subscribe, and share this podcast with others if you haven't already done so. And people who are looking to live their best audacious lives, this is a place for them to stop and pick up some really cool insights. Of course, your support helps us grow and reach even more listeners who can benefit from these conversations. Exactly, prioritizing sleep, recharging your spirit. So stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious, y'all. Take care.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stephenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.